going to start with part 4 of Federalist number 6. All right. The celebrated Pericles, in compliance with the resentment of a prostitute at the expense of much of the blood and treasure of his countrymen, attacked, vanquished, and destroyed the city of Samnians. The same man, stimulated by private pique against the Magurensians, another nation of Greece, or to avoid a prosecution with which he was threatened as an accomplice in a supposed theft of the statuary of Phidias, or to get rid of the accusations prepared to be brought against him for dissipating the funds of the state in the purchase of popularity, or from a combination of all these causes, was the primitive author of the famous and fatal war, which, after various vicissitudes, intermissions, and renewals, terminated in the ruin of the Athenian Commonwealth. Okay, if you're hearing these names for the first time, I did too for the first time some 20-some years ago, almost 30 years ago. Because I'm mostly talking about the Federalist Papers for people who do not speak English as a first language and maybe did not take any courses about history of Rome or Greece. So some of these names will be new to you. Just be patient. You will gradually learn them. So for example, myself, I don't know if the pronunciation is Mega or Majorensians or Megarensians. Okay? But Pericles is one of the most famous people. When you study the ancient Greece, and all these founding fathers knew that. So when he starts the paragraph by saying the celebrated Pericles, the very famous and very well known Pericles, a lot of these people read. There was a work that was very famous. It was called Plutarch's Lives of the Famous Athenians and Romans, and which was a short biography of famous ancient Greeks and ancient Romans. So a lot of these were familiar with that work, and he is quoting from Plutarch's Lives, and says that Pericles, who was so famous, so well liked, and is one of the founders and big figures of Greece, Athens. He says, following the paragraph we just read, that human beings are ambitious and will do anything for power, for vanity, for self-aggrandizement, for self-gratification. He says even Pericles got himself in trouble and got the blood and treasure of his land in trouble. And he's talking about, he says, attacked, vanquished, and destroyed the city of Samnians. Vanquished and destroyed the city of Samnians. It's kind of like brought them under his control, total control, and destroyed them. And then the same man, stimulated by private pique against Magurensians, another nation of Greece, this because he had personal issues with them, okay, threatened another nation, or to avoid the prosecution which he was threatened as an accomplice in a supposed theft of statuary of Phidias. So they accused him of planning on stealing the statue of Phidias, and they also accused him of attacking another city of Athens just because of self-glory and all these things. He says even he did such a thing. He's telling the people that say commercial nations or republics won't go to war with another. He says, here's a lesson of history. We've read this. Even Pericles was able to do these things because of vanity, self-love, or some say because he was infatuated with such and such women. So he says, do not be fooled and say republics will elect good leaders and these things won't happen. It is crazy to think that. And then he goes on to say, or to get rid of the accusations prepared to be brought against him for dissipating the funds of the state in the purchase of popularity. They'd accused him that he'd used the state treasury, people's money, to buy popularity, to maybe hand it to people to make himself popular, well-known, well-liked, or by different methods, just buy himself popularity. He had emptied the state treasury. Or from a combination of all of these causes, was the primitive author of the famous and fatal war distinguished in Grecian annals by the name of Peloponnesian War. This, which after various vicissitudes means ups and downs, intermissions means pauses, and renewals, terminated in the ruin of Athenian Commonwealth. So he says, even with Pericles, he was accused or he did certain things which gradually led the Athenian Commonwealth to the Peloponnesian War, which is a very important war between Athens and Sparta. Athens, a sea and naval power, Sparta, a land power, and they had almost a 30-year war which destroyed both of them, and that's what he's saying. He's saying even when Pericles was in power, because of certain things that he did or he did not do, because of accusations here and there, and because of the actions he took, possibly that made the Spartans think that he's up to something that they should not allow him to get away with. So they rose up, they fought a war with Athens, and that brought everybody down. And the Peloponnesian War was almost at the end of Athens' greatness, which he will talk about in the future. But he's starting to give historical examples. I told you in our project, studying history is very important. And he says he looked at what Pericles, even the celebrated Pericles, the very famous, well-loved, and people who write history books about him, see what he could do, knowingly or unknowingly. He says this is a course of history. This is what other nations do. Sometimes you make the wrong move, really wrong move, and somebody else might think that you're going to attack them then or in the future, so they make a wrong move. And in this case, it says Peloponnesian War happened, which is a very famous war, one that is very studied, and I think you should take a look at it. There are videos available that you can learn from. This way, Even if you don't have a background knowing all the Greek and Latin names, you'll know a lot. You'll know enough to say you know the Peloponnesian War. But it is a war that brought destruction to both of them. Years ago, when I started studying American history, this is after I started getting interested in human rights issues, I would look at some of the writings of the government's writings, the State Department writings and recommendations. I would go look at the books. They're all in foreign relations of the United States. And at one time, right at the beginning of what came to be known as the Cold War, it was recommended reading for a lot, because they were just kind of saying America is almost like a sea, naval, air power, and contrasting it with Soviet Union being a great land power. So they just wanted some of the officers or some of the people to read these, be familiar with this war, because it has lessons to teach. So here it's again telling people that 13 different states, 13 different nations, or 3 or 4 confederacies that you say they're not going to go to war because they'll be commercial friendly. He says you're fool to think that, because they're ambitious men that are always looking for their own glory, and they'll put anything to waste and ruins just to satisfy themselves. So he says, beware of that. So we'll continue with the next paragraph soon. And I know there will be lots of resources available for you all to learn these material. I'm just hoping to give you a head start. I'm hoping to share with you the sense of agency I have. I have a $20 phone, and the only thing I have is love for you and the future generations.